Hey, welcome to the Go-To Physio Podcast. In today's episode, we chat to John, a therapist who has transitioned from working in the NHS to setting up a very successful private practice, and you will learn his biggest mistakes, but also his biggest successes. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to episode number 18 of the Go-To Physio Podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan and thank you for joining us once again. And I can't believe it's episode number 18. And once again, what we're going to do is we're going to get back into showing you how to apply the content that we've covered over the first 15 or so episodes and how therapists are actually applying this in the real world. And as I've always said, everything I put out, I want it to be able to be applicable to the real world. I want you to be able to get real world results with real people, and everything that we do from our return to play course to our mentorship, we follow that principle to the T. Now, John's an interesting case, and it's a really interesting one to listen to, and there's a lot of people going to resonate with it. A lot of people are on a similar journey to John. A lot of people may be slightly past John, but I still think there's a lot of things you can learn from John and what he's doing now, because he is about to expand massively, and he has grown his clinic predominantly on word of mouth, and he's got some massive plans and expansion, which is really encouraging. And then also for the therapists who maybe are still either in university or in the NHS or an equivalent setting and are thinking about going out on their own, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. And some of the key things that I want you to look out for here today is the emotions and feelings that you may experience when you actually go out on your own. Okay, it can be a little bit scary. There could be a little bit of doubt. There's that voice in the back of your mind saying, "What if?" And I think that's something to consider. Now, with John's case, he was a little bit lost, a little bit confused. He had kind of the NHS saying, "Oh, you need to do less hands-on treatment." He felt, well, maybe I should be doing a bit more, and he ultimately, through his own admission, he lacked structure. Okay, when he got in touch with me and we had a chat, I remember he had a particularly tricky case where, again, you could kind of feel that self-doubt coming through, and we've all been there. I've been there recently as well. We go through this wave where, you know, something doesn't quite go right with a patient. The natural thing is to start doubting yourself, and I think that's where the structure and the step-by-step system really comes into its core then, because you can really clinically reason and logically reason, okay, where you need to go next with the patient, and it stops you, as Shane talks about in this particular episode, about just jumping from one thing to the other. And it's so easy that if something's not working as effectively as maybe you expected it, and you've got a good clinical reasoning, that the natural thing to do is start to jump. Okay, and I remember earlier in my career, looking on YouTube and all these kind of things. I remember the guy come in and he pulled one of my players' ears and his toe touch improved. You know, just stuff like that where, you know, there's a serious lack of clinical reasoning. Looking back, it was just a novel stimulus to the nervous system, and we got some short-term change. Now, 5 minutes later, the guy was back exactly where he started, but the point being that, you know, there's so many various things that we can do to create short-term changes, but the key thing is having that structure to take people successfully from that initial assessment and right through to the higher level rehab. And John talks really well about his journey, and as I said, I think there's a lot of good lessons, especially when he talks about, you know, maybe treating patients differently, where some of the higher level GAA players, in his instance, he'd be more than happy to take them to the higher levels of rehab, but the person that wants to lift their grandkids or their kids, he may not take them to those levels that can ensure that person's resilient enough to tolerate that load. So without further ado, let's hear John's story. John is a funny one, and again, John came to us. He was on one of the first mentorships it was actually a 12-month program. Then he admits that he didn't adhere to it due to various commitments with the clinic and stuff like that, and that's a big part also is why we cut the content down from 12 months to actually to now being able to consume the content within 90 days or 3 months. Is it's easier to keep your attention for that length of time and to actually get all the content. So that was one of the big reasons that we actually switched. It was therapists like John, where they just didn't have the time, or we couldn't keep their attention over 12 months because life does get in the way. Whereas now when you come on to Go-To Therapist Mentorship, instead of waiting 6 months to have all the lumbar spine techniques and assessments and treatment and rehab, you get it within the first month, and it builds from module 2, which is the lower limb, module 3, which is the upper limb, and then you're into module 4. And one other big thing I want to highlight here that I want you to pay particular attention to today is John admitting that when he came on the mentorship, he was looking for hands-on, he was looking for this, he was looking for that, but one of the biggest changes he made was actually the subjective assessment. Okay, and I'll talk about that later after you hear from John. But the importance of the subjective assessment to allow you to have clarity in explaining the findings specific to that person. So you'll hear me talk a lot about designing a bespoke treatment plan specific to the person. Okay, unless you have that subjective assessment nailed down with that patient, then it's very, very hard to design that, but also explain it. Okay, and I'm going to touch upon that in a little bit as well. So without further ado, there's lots of lessons to be learned here. You know, they say, you know, if you want to get somewhere, that you should model successful people who are a few steps ahead of you. And, you know, John certainly is a model therapist, you know, and if you do model yourself around John, his philosophies, you're not going to go too far wrong, because he is enjoying phenomenal success at the moment. So without further ado, let's get into the episode, and I'll pick up on a couple more points on the other side once you hear from John.
So cheers to John for coming on to the podcast. John is a physiotherapist working in Cavan. You're working in, John, is it?
Yeah, we have a practice in Ballyconnell, just on the edge of the border in County Cavan, yeah.
Brilliant, cool. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, John, like prior to starting the mentorship, you know, what challenges you were running into in the clinic or, you know, in your practice, and what made you seek out really some help in terms of the mentorship program?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2009 from Man Met, and worked over in the NHS in England, and then came back to Northern Ireland, worked in the NHS till about 2012. I was at that stage, I suppose I was getting a little bit lost and confused in what I was aiming to be as a physio, you know. So in the NHS, we were being directed towards more class management of chronic pain and maybe less hands-on management. And I felt my calling as a physio, I suppose, was to do a little bit more hands-on and be a little bit more involved with the patient. So I left in 2012 and we set up the clinic here in Cavan, and I suppose I lacked a little bit direction in that time because I was here on my own and I was setting up on my own, you know. So I suppose I was calling out for a mentor to kind of direct me and to kind of just put me on the right path. So we set up the clinic, and it's been going so well since day one. But at that stage, I think I lacked a little bit of structure in what I was trying to do. And as I say, I just needed that direction. Maybe some of the treatments I was doing weren't really working so well. And I suppose I just felt a little bit kind of lost in where I was headed, you know. So that's when I think around that time stumbled across Dave and yourself. And I haven't really looked back since. Again, you know, it was kind of just exactly what I needed, you know, at the time, at the right place, you know.
Oh, good, yeah. I think that resonates with a lot of people. I mean, I was a similar story myself where I was working in the NHS. I was on respiratory, and I was learning a lot of new information, don't get me wrong, but I felt like in what I wanted to do, I was becoming almost de-skilled. So, you know, on in a while, and anatomy and stuff wasn't as fresh as it used to be. And then I remember coming to work in private practice, and it was like a steep learning curve again in terms of going back to the books, learning the anatomy again, and all of that. Yeah, so I think that resonates with a lot of people, that kind of, you know, coming out of the public service.
Yeah, I suppose like I wouldn't change the NHS for the world because it gave me an incredible background. Now, you know, people coming in, medications, you know, I'm pretty good at that. You know, I did the whole rotations as a junior physio, and it gave me an incredible background, and I would never change that. But I do agree with you when you're saying about de-skilling. Like when I first came in here, I would kind of worry that some of the treatments I gave some of the patients in the first few months I opened here, because again, in the NHS, you had mentors there, do you know what I mean? And you could go and speak to them, or in the staff room, whatever. Here I was on my own, and that's where Dave and yourself and the support network came in, that, you know, no question was stupid. Like, and at times I felt very stupid, but no question, like, I had someone that I could ask, and you wouldn't be kind of laughed at, even though you might feel intimidated initially. It was amazing, you know, still is, to be fair.
It's funny when you say that. You couldn't like your early start. I got an email there the other day from a patient, and they had replied to the rehab I sent them, but this is like a good 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was looking at the exercises I sent, and I was cringing like, oh, geez.
Yeah, we'll just kind of move away from that, you kind of think, yeah. But I suppose my view on that is we have to go through that, you know what I mean? Like, it's a good sign to look at your development to see where you've come from then to where you are now, I suppose, you know.
At the end of the day, people still got better back then, you know, so you were still...
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe you've got two boxes now, but I think as long as you're in there with good intentions and you're doing your best, generally people improve and they get better. So as long as you're helping people, I don't think that's a problem. Like you said, it's part of your development. And I suppose, going back to what you're saying, John, when you first started, before kind of the mentorship, that lack of structure a little bit, and how did that kind of actually make you feel at the time in terms of like your treatment sessions? Like, what was the real world effect of that, do you think?
Well, I suppose when I graduated, as we were always told that everyone must get better, you know, I struggled to understand that, you know, people's pain can evolve in different ways, and I went into, I suppose, starting private practice to think that I had to cure everyone straight away. And the structure that I would use, like, I had gone in different courses and I was trying to bring, you know, different little facets of that into the practice, but I don't think I was bringing anything overall. You know, I was kind of feeling intimidated. Well, I need to do this and I need to do that, and I suppose I was just plodding along. Like, patients were getting better, but maybe the high level cases, you know, like the high level runners or the high level, as we see Gaelic footballers over here, they were maybe breaking down a little bit more. So, you know, with some, I do some return to sport out in the pitch, but then I'd think, well, why I didn't do it with the shoulder injury who wanted to pick their kids up. Do you know what I mean? So I maybe treated patients differently to their ability, and maybe under-treated people, you know, like the lady that wanted to pick her grandkids up and stuff, like, you know. So that's probably what I'm trying to say, yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, going back to that email I was saying, when people still got better, I think people still got better, but the pain came back a bit more than I would have liked back then, where, you know, they get better, but then maybe 3 weeks later or even 3 months later, they're back with a similar problem or a different problem. You're kind of seeing the same cases again, where if someone's discharged, unless they're coming to a Pilates class or something, hopefully I don't need to see them again for a good while. So I think that's definitely something that I can reflect on in my early practice, was not being able to keep the pain away. Maybe get it away initially, but keeping it away was another story.
Yeah, for sure.
And I suppose, like, what made you, obviously, I assume you followed Dave for a while on Facebook and stuff, and like, what made you take action to actually like sign up and apply for the mentorship? Like, what was there a moment that you said, all right, I'm just going to do this, or was it a build up, or?
I think I had come across like Dave's info on Facebook and through the emails, and it was in the back of my head. And, you know, I kind of, setting up the new clinic, I was a little bit hesitant, you know, financial wise, is this something that's viable for me? But I remember one patient in particular, and at the time now I would assess that as a simple low back pain, but I think I made the patient worse. And I kind of, after the patient, I just sat down, or after the patient had left, and I sat down and I said, you know what, I'm not sure I'm making any benefit here. You know, them times you have self-doubt, and, you know, he had kind of said he'd went to someone else further away and got better. And I was like, you know what, I need to do something about this, because, and it's not just because I felt like the clinic was always busy, but I feel I wanted patients to get more bang for their buck, simplistically, and I wanted to be able to make an impact quicker than maybe I was, you know. So I just emailed Dave, and as always, Dave came back friendly, giving advice. And to be honest, he like, and I'm not just saying this, he never pushed anything onto me. He kind of listened to me, kind of, you know, I was in the midst of a kind of a bit of a self-doubt, you know, and he kind of just told me to come in, sample it for a little bit, and I joined up, and it's been great since, you know.
Oh, good. And I suppose when you first started then, and I know you've been on a while now, John, so it's hard to reflect back then, but like, can you remember in like the first 3 months, let's say, first going through the content, how did you find it? So, like, was it a bit of a shock at first, or was it
I definitely felt, holy God, I know nothing. That sort of way. Because it was intense. It was fantastic, but I was like, you know, the fear that I hope Dave doesn't ask me anything, or I hope he doesn't kind of see me as a fraud of a physio. It was intense, but from the first couple of days, I got really excited in that you were allowed to see kind of the 12-month plan as it was then, and I was like, this is amazing. So, you know, I could see that we were going to do back 1 month, lower limb, upper limb. Now, I'd say my adherence initially was I struggled a little bit with that, just because with the clinic and football, I was playing football as well. So that's one of the big things I'd kind of question myself at the start. But that was me, nothing to do with the content. But it was I think I love the structure of it, but I liked the fact that I knew in 6 months I'd be delving into lower limb, or 7 months I'd be working on the ankle, you know. And it just kind of, it raised my spirits and I kind of got excited over it, you know.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, I think that's one of the reasons now, like we kind of shortened it into that, the 12-week kind of course content, where it still probably takes most people about a year to get. But I think in terms of keeping focus, I think keeping focus for 12 months is a lot harder than keeping focus for 12 months. Definitely, we looked at the structure a little bit, because a lot of people were having that same issue in terms of 12 months of content, but busy with the clinic, trying to grow your own practice, busy with GA and stuff. It's hard to commit for 12 months, whereas 12 weeks, I think it tends to work a little bit better now.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's show. For more clinical content and tips to help you implement this content in the real world, please visit GoToPhysio.com for more information, including my 6-step patient adherence checklist, which you can download for free. And also there's more blog content that helps you implement this stuff in the real world. You'll also find links to my YouTube show, the Go-To Physio show, as well as lots of more information to help you become the go-to therapist, helping real patients get real results in the real world.
And I suppose when you first started off, John, like, what did you focus on implementing in the clinic?
The biggest thing that I found was how I explained what I was doing to my patients. So the effective explanation and getting a whiteboard in the clinic and just talking it through to the patients. Every time I talked it through to a patient, I feel I understood it better myself. So I kind of put a test to myself, right? You have to make the patient understand this, and then it'll show that you understand it. That's the way I kind of approached it. So the first thing the patient sees when they come into clinic is me or our secretarial staff. And so we implemented, you know, everything from, as Dave said, from day one. So when we had that nailed, but my subjective assessment was the thing that I felt that I gleaned the most information from. So I couldn't do my effective explanation if I didn't have a good, thorough subjective. So the first few weeks of the course was all about, you know, how you greet the patient, how you speak to the patient, and then how you start your assessment, be it subjective or objective, you know.
Yeah, and that effective explanation is massive. I think it's a lot of work to do in the first session, but I think if you can do that well in the first session, it saves you a lot of problems down the line, and kind of meet all the objections that might be in the patient's back of the head, like, you know, is it really going to be better in 6 weeks, or, you know, is it something I'm going to have to live with forever, or, you know, progress every week. And I think that the effective explanation really, really helps.
I was a little bit hesitant that, you know, initially we'd been taught, you know, patients are coming in to pay to your clinic, like you have to get them in, talk as little, do as much, you know. That's something that I've kind of evolved away from, that I'm happy, like, we will always try to do something with the patient, but if they're leaving understanding to me, and that's evolved in my mindset, that I'm happier that they know exactly the plan and the structure. And there may be, like, there has been times when I've just sat and talked to the patient and gone through, you know, the effective explanation and involved them, and we haven't done anything, and I've got to be okay with that, you know.
Good point there. I think a lot of therapists, I'm sure a lot of people listen to this podcast, with the best intention, spend as little time as possible on subjective assessment, because they want to try and help them get out of pain as quickly as possible. So it's almost like, let's run through the questions, and then, you know, it's elbow in the glutes or whatever, just trying to free up the pain. But I think taking that time, and like you said a minute ago, it kind of forces you as a therapist to actually write a treatment plan. So like, sometimes if you're pushing through and you just go through it, you kind of go session by session with the flow. But if you take your session, sit down, and use that as a therapist, it forces you to have clarity. You need to sit down and think, right, what do I need to do over the next 6 weeks to get this person back running, lifting their kids or whatever. It's not a good point.
No, definitely, yeah.
So after the 3 months you've been implementing, you've been, you know, practicing your effective explanation, what results did you start to see that gave you some confidence, really, you're on the right track?
Well, specifically, we would see, patients coming in with back pain. We'd be implementing some rib cage stuff, some diaphragmatic breathing, some rest and relaxation movements, and patients couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe patients were getting better. I have a little thing in the clinic that I like patients to give me a text every couple of days and just let me know how they're going. But the majority, there was always a few sticky patients, but the majority of patients were, moving better. I think when we did the effective explanation, without touching people were feeling better. So patients were improving, specifically with the back pain we were working on, the iliocostalis and starting to free up the diaphragm. I was shocked about the improvements. So patients, once I had told them we need to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to move on to the steps, they were excited. Patients were coming back, and each session, and there were the people that had setbacks, but people were improving that each session that I had the session planned, we were able to do it and we were able to progress on. So the hands-on work, was a massive part, but in my mind, it has developed only a small part now, where we get the patients up there, we're mobilizing them more, we're doing our exercises, and we're actually doing a little bit more than just hands-on. So that's the biggest thing, and that has evolved again in my head.
Not good. And going back then, I suppose, to what you signed up for in the first place, that kind of structure, compared to when you started the mentorship compared to now, what's different now? So how has that really changed your practice? How has it made you feel personally?
Well, for me, I'm completely worked towards, the pro sport mentorship way. So I follow that. It's ingrained in my head. There's some patients that you have to deviate a little bit, but I'll set, we have the graph where, we're going to load, we're going to move, we're going to return you to sport, where, I follow that to the letter of the law. Now, there are things that I need to brush up on, but that is just the way I treat my patients now. That is the way, when we have a new physio hopefully starting soon, that is the way they're going to follow their steps. So they're going to work towards the 7 steps there, and that's just my practice now, because I see it's clear, it is clarity. I'm not getting kind of caught betwixt and between methods. This is just the way I work now, and I just accept, I'm happy to accept that,
Yeah. And I think it is, and no matter what structure it is, I think it's important to have that structure in place. Not necessarily even just the pro sport academy structure.
Yeah.
You don't have a structure. I think when those tricky cases come along, it's really hard. It's really easy, to get lost and get bogged down into something like a rabbit hole. Whereas when you've got some kind of a structure, no matter how easy or how complex the patient is, you've got something you can go back to and kind of piece the information together and then break it down. So.
Well, initially I kind of got caught between the way I had previously trained and the way I train now. And sometimes I do find myself going back. But as you say, if you just trust the process, and again, I have to talk myself into that too. You just trust the process. And, it's about what's activating, what's not working, what's lengthening, what's shortening. And you are a detective, I suppose. That's the way. And that is the way, I don't panic. I just try and logically work it out, and 9 times out of 10 you will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. It's funny now when you're saying that, just trusting the system. I've got a patient in at the moment, and she's a chronic back pain patient, and there's her initial start of flexion, just struggling to clear it. It's really, really hard, and it's very easy to get bogged down and start moving away, but you just have to put your trust in that system.
Trust in it, yeah.
It's better now, but it's taken a good bit of work to get there. And I think sometimes when you get stuck, and I'm sure you're evolving, I'm still evolving with this, it's just higher level thinking. Okay, well, why is it? Not straying away from the system, but just higher level questions in terms of, okay, well, what needs to happen for this to be successful, and then going through the motions, testing it all, reassessing and breaking it down from there. So I think sometimes when you get stuck, it's just, okay, let's take a step back, let's look at the bigger picture here, what else needs to happen here. And I think that's a good point. Cool. And I suppose going forwards now, John, something you've been here. Is it about 3 years you've been on the?
Yeah.
So going forward, I suppose the next 12 months, what's next for ONeill Physiotherapy? What's in the pipeline?
You're going to be seeing me at the mentorship refreshers, because I've been at 2 this year, and I'm hoping to go to the 1 next week. And it's just, I feel when I'm in the company of people who are working along the same way, something else brushes off me. So that's something we're working on. We're moving to a new clinic in a couple of months. It's an area just across the road from where we are now. So we have a big gym space, 3 clinic rooms, and I just wanted an area that I could bring patients into and do more rehab, more kind of active rehab and return to sport. So we'll have inside and outside facilities. So so we're hoping to move into there in March, I think. Brilliant. And it's just a matter of improve. Like, I'm by no means, finished with this. I've so much reading to do and so much more work to do, but the beauty of it is, like, Dave coming back from Japan, there's new stuff. Like, there's always new stuff, and you guys are always evolving it. So I get emails all the time of new stuff that we learned, and I just like the fact that there's nothing standard here. It's changed and it's evolving, and the treatment plans are improving and becoming better. So I'm happy for it. No,
definitely. I think that it'll always evolve. The research is always changing. There's always updates to the research, and I think it's great when there's a community of people that are sharing all that stuff, because it's hard to keep up with all of it yourself. But that group, we've got like 300 plus alumni members now, and somebody posts a study up, and it makes you think about things. Then again, and refresher days, I think, are massive as well. Like the mentorship changes after every refresher, because somebody said something that makes something better, like the effective explanation gets updated or something else. Because like you said, just getting a group of like-minded therapists in the room, I think that's powerful in terms of growth.
Definitely. You always come away with something different. Even when you're working with like a person you've never met before, and you're working on something, as part of the content, they'll say, have you tried it this way, or have you tried it that way? And I always leave saying, okay, well, I'll try that on Monday, and it normally works out for the better,
No, definitely. No, perfect. Well, cheers for that, John. Cheers for coming on to the podcast. It's been great to hear your story. Looking forward to the next 12 months for ONeill Physiotherapy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so what an interesting episode today. And as I said, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here, and just a couple of things that I want to highlight and really make you aware to maybe reflect on, but also consider if you are going to follow in a similar path to John, or even if you're a therapist who may be very, very similar to John at the moment. There's a couple of things that I want to really highlight. One of the first things that I thought was brilliant that John said was, he said, if you can show the plan to the patient, then it shows that you too understand it. Okay, and that goes right back to the therapist having confidence and clarity. Okay, because if the therapist has confidence and clarity, then that means then that the bullshit detectors, excuse my French, are down. Okay, because patients, and I've said this in the Return to Play course last week, patients can smell bullshit. Okay, they're people. And if you can explain the problem, the solution, and you have a treatment plan to bridge that gap from where they are now to where they want to get to, if you truly understand it, you can explain it in very, very simple terms. Okay, you don't have to use big fancy words. Then the patient also has clarity. And he mentioned the importance of the subjective assessment to allow you to effectively explain bespoke to the person. Okay, and again, I want to reiterate that you cannot design a treatment plan bespoke to a person if you don't understand and don't have a good subjective history. Okay, and that was one of the first things that he really had to nail down on. He thought he was coming for a lot of hands-on, a lot of rehab exercises, and the biggest probably thing that he took away initially, and the biggest thing that he implemented, was asking the right questions and asking more higher level critical thinking questions. Okay, because then once you have higher level quality questions, that gives you a lot better information. Okay, so again, he was probably asking the same amount of questions as he was pre-joining the mentorship, but the quality of the questions are a lot higher now that are actually giving him the correct information, or giving him more useful information. And by understanding the subjective assessment, that's what allows us to give that person a bespoke treatment plan, but make it contextual to their lives. Okay, and unless you have a clear understanding of the subjective story, the patient's story, it's very hard to put the treatment plan into context to their life. Okay, so the better the understanding, the more context you'll be able to add in, the more clear your explanation will be, because there'll be no bullshit. The more clarity the patient will have. Okay, the more clarity the patient will have, then from my experience, that gives them a lot of relief in itself, that there's a plan in place. And John mentioned that, and that's something I want you to pick up on as well. He's found, just like we found, and I've talked about this before, that we do less hands-on treatment than ever before in our initial assessment, but we make sure that the patient understands in the first session the plan. okay, and that they're happy with the plan. And patients, just in John's case in Ireland, just like they are over in Huddersfield, are happier than ever because they've got clarity on the plan. Okay, they understand what's going to happen now, rather than, you know, getting that short-term relief with that extra 5 minutes of hands-on treatment. That's probably not going to stick anyway because we haven't had good enough load tolerance. But the fact that they're happier, they're feeling better without actually touching them as much, is a great thing. Okay, and again, a lot of that is the patient has clarity. In order for the patient to have clarity, the therapist needs to have clarity. Okay, because again, that bullshit detector will go down. The more you understand something, the patient will know that you understand it, because your physiology won't lie. Okay, so John's patients are feeling better with doing less and less hands-on in the first session. He's got his head around it now, and you know, it's something that I think a lot of people can learn from, where we feel there's this expectation to do loads and loads of hands-on in the first session. You can address the big elephant in the room if you're struggling with that. Okay, and again, I talk a lot about that in the mentorship, about how to overcome some of these problems that you might have, some limiting beliefs that you may have. Okay, and there's some very, very easy ways to overcome that. Okay, and the last thing I want to pick up on today, and John said it, and this is like anything in life, it's not just treatment plans, but it's amazing when you plan these sessions, how often than not you stick to the plans, okay, and how you keep progressing specific to the plan that you started in the first session. Okay, so you write down that treatment plan. I think personally it happens on a subconscious level, but we start working towards these plans, these goals. Okay, and it's amazing how more often than not you actually stick to the plan. Okay, so you put down these plans in place in the first session. It's amazing. By, you know, you would have predicted session 3 or 4 they're going to be hopping, or they're going to be back running, or whatever it is. They're going to be back, you know, bending down for 5 minutes doing gardening, or whatever the goal was. It's amazing that once you have that intention in the first session, how much more the change that happens in your behavior, in your attention and your focus, in order to get that person back to the plans. Because now that you've put it out there in the world, you've got a lot more accountability. It's amazing how your behavior changes as a result of that. And I feel like I haven't explained that very well, but I've noticed that in all walks of life, not just the physiotherapy plans, that once you put it out there, subconsciously you start working towards that plan, and obviously the patient would as well. Okay, so there's a lot to be said for that. Okay, so the final part is John is now doing, he came to the mentorship because he wanted it, you know, probably a little bit more confidence with hands-on. Some of the stuff he was doing maybe wasn't as working as well as he thought. What he's doing now, that's allowing him to grow and move into this, you know, which will be a world-class facility soon. He's doing less hands-on, and he's actually got more time to do more graded exposure, more low tolerance, and more resilience building with patients. Okay, and the patients are as happy as they ever were. Okay, so that's what the Go-To Mentorship is about. It's about giving you the confidence and clarity to take a patient from the initial assessment right through to the final session. But not only that, but explain it effectively to the patient and keep them on the right track, so that by the back end of it, you know, we're doing less and less hands-on, we're doing more and more resilience building. Okay, so that we can give long-lasting, or help that patient have long-lasting, meaningful results. Okay, so really good episode. Lots of great points from John in that. Thanks to Shane as always for asking the questions, and I think that one is one that we can learn a lot about. Okay, in the next couple of episodes, we've got some very, very important lessons from therapists as well. We've got one therapist, an osteopath, who was kind of stuck on kind of 10 to 12 patients a week. And we've got one therapist who literally was seeing 3 people a week, and now his actually he's turning into an Instagram superstar. Okay, so we'll talk to two of them, as well as a couple of other therapists, and show you how to apply this content and how they're applying it in the real world. Okay, if with the greatest respect to those therapists, with the greatest respect to Alan, Leon, John, if they can do it, then so can you. If I can do it, then so can you. Okay, so again, if you're interested, head over to www.gotophysio.com, and there's loads of information there about the Go-To Therapist Mentorship. There's the Return to Play course. You can pick up a copy of my book, and there's tons and tons of free resources. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's show. For more information, please visit www.thegotofysio.com, where you can download my 6-step patient adherence checklist absolutely free, as well as read the accompanying blog that goes with today's episode. We've got lots of cheat sheets and clinical content to help you implement to get real world results with real patients that ultimately helps you become the go-to therapist and allows you to build a profitable, busy private practice or become that go-to therapist in professional sport. I'll speak to you soon on the next episode.